Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to StoriesRoc. And there are always those things that you can always laugh about later, but not exactly when they're happening. So tonight you get to hear all about it. Mistakes were made. True confessions, New Year's resolutions, and lessons learned eventually. Meghan Reno is a certified integrative health coach and is currently working in dietary at Highland Hospital. Meghan is also an English major from St. Bonaventure University and has decided to return to her roots. She is going back to graduate school in the fall at Brockport for her master's degree in creative writing and plans to become a creative writing teacher. She's currently working on compiling her short stories into a book to be published. Something unique about Meghan is that she can sing. And her favorite song is Total Praise. Tonight, Meghan will read The Warming House.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right, my mouth hurts from smiling. The Warming House. Upon starting freshman year at St. Bonaventure University, I was ready to leap into the freedom of independence. I had been heavily drinking throughout high school, and college was the perfect opportunity to let that issue run wild without it being noticed, or so I thought. I began getting write-ups from my RA for being too loud and smoking marijuana in the building. The last straw came one night when I was out in the town with my friends on a Friday. We were leaving one bar and on to the next. Now, I already have a small bladder, but when I was drinking, it shrunk even more. I turned to my friend Lauren, crossed my legs, clenched my teeth. I gotta go now. See that little entrance right over there? I think we can hide in it and go, I whispered to her. Lauren laughed and agreed. We scattered over away from our friends to the entranceway, pulled down our pants, and let the river run. All of a sudden, Lauren spotted a cop car come zooming down the street, and the policeman caught sight of us. He swiftly swerved the car into a parallel spot and jumped out of the car yelling, "And Justin, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Lauren was already halfway down the sidewalk at this point, sprinting to catch up with our other friends, leaving me stranded, pants down, alone in the squatting position. The cop stood tall over me and a sarcastic, polite tone said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to pull up your pants," he said with his hands on his hips. It was as if all of the alcohol left my system immediately. I quickly pulled up my pants and continued to watch my friends gallivant away to have more fun. "You're coming with me, miss," he sneered as he grabbed my left arm so hard, leaving a bruise, and tossed me into the back seat. "Now I'm going to need you to hand me your cell phone and pull up your mother's number and your driver's license," he yelped. What in the actual hell? Is this guy for real? I thought to myself. I squinted with my drunken eyes and scrolled to find my mom titled Mama Joe and handed him the tiny flip phone. "Hello, Mrs. Reno. This is Officer Schmidt from Allegheny County. I'm calling in regards to your daughter, Meghan. Would you like to know what your daughter was just found doing?" I buried my head into my hands and began to sob. How could he be so rude? Was he allowed to do this? What an asshole, I thought to myself. "I just found your 18-year-old daughter inebriated and publicly urinating in front of a church," he exclaimed. In my defense, I had no idea it was a church. I could vaguely hear my mom on the other end apologizing, as if it were her fault for my dirty deed. "I'm so sorry, sir. I will deal with her. I'm so sorry," she repeated. "Yep, well, luckily this is her first offense. I'm bringing her back to campus, but I just thought you should know what is going on down here," he said, turning his head back to me and glaring. I rolled my eyes and they talked on my phone. Several moments later, he passed the phone back to me and we were headed back to campus. I was brought to the RA office and given a written-up slip, basically meaning I needed to go see the school counselor. After leaving the office, they brought me back to my dorm room where my roommate was hanging out and watching a movie. She welcomed me into the room and promised the RA she would keep an eye on me to make sure that I was okay. I hated knowing that everyone was always so concerned about me, always feeling like a child. The following Monday morning, I made my way to the guidance counselor and sat in for an hour session. She asked me about my drinking and she thought if I had a problem. Well, it's not like everyone else isn't doing it, I said defensively. She leaned forward and clasped her hands and gave me a gentle look. We're just talking about you right now, Meghan, not anyone else. This is a safe place. You don't need to feel ashamed. She stated in a voice as if she understood. Tears began to form at the base of my eyes, and then I wrinkled my nose and sniffed back the flood. She continued to fill the empty space. Usually when drinking is a problem, there is always a trail of evidence behind it. Blackouts, urinating, cop cars, jail time. Well, you know the deal, she smirked. Never pretty, right? Right, I agreed reluctantly. I have an idea for you, Meghan. There is an opportunity to do community service through one of our campus ministry organizations, instead of having to go through the court system and end up paying a lot of money for a public violation. I can probably make a deal with the officer and get you off the hook, okay? But you have to do 60 hours of community service, and you have to see me during that time, she said, leaning back into her pink velvet chair. I felt my chest loosen a little, and for the first time in a long time, or maybe ever, I felt God's grace sink into my life and into my heart. I agreed, and she handed me a sheet of options to choose from for community service. It ranged from a home that helped abused women and children, helping out the friars at the chapel we called the Mountain, and then there was the Warming House. The Warming House is the oldest student-run soup kitchen in the nation by St. Bonaventure students. I was immediately drawn to the name, the Warming House. When I was a little girl, my dad used to take me to St. Anne's Soup Kitchen in downtown Rochester, and I always loved sitting with people, hearing stories, and sharing a meal together. Looking back in retrospect, I truly believe this was God's way of leading me into a life of service, a pathway out of addiction and into the arms of love. One of my dearest friends, Lauren, not the one that deserted me, joined me every single Friday to help out at the Warming House. She didn't have to do any community service. She just wanted to support me and be with me. I had never had a friend like that before. It was amazing to me how all of the pain and suffering I went through was leading me into this new and bright life. The first Friday we volunteered together, we were put on baking duty. We decided we were going to make blueberry muffins. Those were always easy and delicious. We found a recipe in one of the old dusty books sitting in the shelf and got to work. We each took turns reading out loud the ingredients and measurements to each other, whisking, cracking, and pouring. The batter was finished, and we were ready to put them in the oven. While we let the muffins rise, we headed out to the common room to meet people and play some cards. I sat at a table with two women, Margaret and Betty. They were mother and daughter. Sitting next to them was 2 big liters of Mountain Dew with snacks from the corner store. They offered me some, and we started to play Go Fish. Margaret asked me about my life and what made me come to the Warming House. I didn't tell her the God-to-honest truth. I simply stated what sat in my heart that day. Well, my dad always brought me to soup kitchens, and I found myself missing it, and missing him. I smiled. She reached her hand across the table and lightly squeezed my hand. Her smile was angelic, and her spirit was as warm as the sun. Lauren waved me over to the kitchen to check on the muffins. I jumped and skipped my way to the oven. With a huge smile on my face, I put on the oven mitts and pulled the golden muffins out from the rack. After letting them cool for a minute or so, I cut one in half for us to try. I bit into the warm, blueberry oozing muffin, closed my eyes, and began to laugh with my mouth full. "These are horrible!" I shouted, laughing so hard. Lauren ran to the garbage and spit hers out. "I think we measured the salt wrong," she screeched in a high-pitched giggle. We laughed for a few good minutes with happy tears rolling down our faces. God is funny like that, bringing humility into our lives when we need it most. And sometimes it is the simplest of things, like making a bad batch of muffins, to send you into roaring laughter with one of your best friends until you're pissing your pants. Only this time I was sober, and I was so grateful to be alive in that moment. We weren't sure if we should send the muffins out, but we did anyways. We warned everyone for their salty taste, and we all had a good laugh about it. The warming house is a place where there is unending grace. God's unending grace shining through all of the weary faces walking through that door each day. Coming in for warm food and conversation. Truly, isn't that all we desire? I'll never forget that night I was in the back of the cop car and how it brought me to where I am today. I continued to serve at the warming house my entire stay at Bonaventure. It truly saved my life. Although I continued to drink throughout the years, I eventually found my way into a sober life, which brings me to right here, right now, sharing stories, laughing with others, and enjoying this beautiful ride of life. God's unending grace blessing me every step of the way.